Welcome to the channel. I'm the Scottish Astrologer, and in this video I explain the real astrological meaning of the term 007 as originated by a man called John Dee. I also show the genius behind John Dee's hieroglyphic monad and how this may also be cleverly linked to the term 007. Now, probably everyone has heard of the longest running, extremely successful film franchise known as James Bond, whose code name is, of course, 007. But where did this term originate? Well, the term 007 originated with John Dee, who was the astrologer and advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. He used to sign 007 when addressing private letters to the Queen, letters that were for her eyes only. So any letter from John Dee to the Queen with 007 on it obviously contained intelligence for Queen Elizabeth, and he used astrology to gain intelligence for the Queen about others who she may have considered a threat. Now, John Dee was actually arrested for attempting to calculate nativities in 1555, so birth charts. That's what nativities means, is birth charts. So he was arrested for attempting to calculate birth charts in the year 1555. And although this was not illegal at the time, the charge was considered treason due to the circumstances surrounding it, because John Dee made birth charts for both Queen Mary I and her half-sister and princess at the time, Elizabeth, who would go on to be the Queen 3 years later, and would also begin the Elizabethan era. Dee, after making nativities for both Mary and Elizabeth, Dee then went on and discussed the birth chart of Queen Mary to Elizabeth, giving Elizabeth in-depth knowledge and thus intelligence on the then Queen Mary. So you can see how this was considered treason. Not calculating the birth charts, that wasn't illegal, but the act of discussing the Queen's birth chart with the would-be Queen and Princess, that was seen as treason. Now, no one knows 100% for sure how John Dee managed to convince the court of his innocence, but it is known that after one man testified in court against John Dee, one of that man's children died, and another one of his children became blind, and everybody obviously thought this was somehow to do with John Dee, okay, as he was believed to have occult powers. So Dee was then released after this fact into the custody of the Catholic Bishop Bonner, okay, for religious examination after this happened. But Dee and the bishop became very good friends and actually formed a strong relationship, because John Dee himself was in fact quite religious. Dee then became the personal advisor and astrologer to the then Princess Elizabeth, who then became Queen in 1558. And Queen Elizabeth even entrusted John Dee with choosing a good date for her coronation, through astrology, of course. The Queen would ask Dee about all things astrological and scientific. She would always consult with Dee about these topics. Dee, in fact, was also the advisor for England's voyages of discovery. Now, thanks to his great knowledge of astronomy, which was the key to nautical navigation at the time. John Dee was also the first person to ever use the term British Empire. John Dee was obviously part of the Queen's Secret Service. If not just part, I believe he was the head of this organisation at the time. Queen Elizabeth had a lot of spies, working for her, and she was constantly being threatened by conspiracy plots to overthrow her, etc. After the Pope of that time announced that she was in fact an illegitimate ruler in the year 1570. Now, all of these plots against Queen Elizabeth were thwarted and stopped by her Secret Service. Now, Dee also went on trips through Europe that was apparently for spiritual conferences, in which he had audiences with very powerful leaders of the time. Leaders the likes of King Stefan Batory of Poland and Emperor Rudolf II, who was the Holy Roman Emperor at the time. Now, this was all apparently to gain astrological intelligence against these men for Queen Elizabeth, but of course the cover was spiritual conferences. But it's pretty obvious to me that with the skills John Dee had as an astrologer, these powerful leaders would have gave him their birth details in order for John Dee to do some astrological work for them, or so they believed. But the actual mission of Dee, in my opinion, was just to gain the birth charts and so intelligence on these men for the Queen. And why birth charts, will you ask? Well, people just don't understand what power, and advantages you could potentially have over someone by simply knowing or having access to their birth chart. If you desired to use this information to your advantage, well, obviously Queen Elizabeth did realise this, You can use this information to your advantage. She realised this, and so she utilised it with the help of John Dee and others, Now, if you take a look on screen, this is the 007 Dee actually signed on letters for the Queen's eyes only. Now, as you will notice, the 7 sits over the O's, Well, you will notice that the top of the 7 goes over the top of both the O's, and the lower part of the 7 actually goes down and below the O's. So this clever placement of the 7 next to the O's clearly has a hidden meaning or meanings. Now, the O's can represent eyes, and the 7 represents the 7 Elohim, and so the 7 planets and luminaries, 5 planets, 2 luminaries, 7 in total, that we can see with our naked eyes from Earth, which of course are the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and of course Saturn. And the 7 is cleverly situated to show these 7 heavenly bodies are above and below our eyes, Now 007 written like this also represents as above, so below. And for those who know numerology, you will know that O represents the number 6. Now again, it's 007, not 007. It's 2 O's and a number. So O in numerology represents the number 6. So 2 O's would be 66, which reduced or added together is 12. If you add 6 plus 6, you get 12. So would then be 12, you'd have the number 12 and the number 7, And this would be representing the 12 representing the 12 zodiac signs, and the 7 obviously representing the 7 planets and luminaries. Again, 5 planets, 2 luminaries, 7 in total that travel through them. Okay, so you have 12, 7, very important numbers, okay, and very relevant numbers for astrology. So clearly that is a particular meaning of 007. It's astrological information that's contained within these letters. That's what you have to remember. And of course Dee was an astrologer. So again, 007, as written like this, was clearly making clear to Queen Elizabeth that this letter actually contained astrological intelligence for her eyes only. And I also think I have found a further hidden meaning that 007 contains that is deeply linked with astrology, and I will explain that to you if you bear with me. And first put your attention on a symbol which John Dee created, which is known as the hieroglyphic monad. Now, this symbol is basically a combination of the 5 planetary symbols, the symbols for the sun and the moon, okay. This hieroglyphic monad also holds the answers to many profound mysteries and also reveals many truths, but only to the truly learned and wise adept. Now, I am not going to read everything Dee wrote concerning this hieroglyphic monad, just a few key points concerning this hieroglyphic monad and showing how this symbol contains all the planetary symbols within one, including also the first and very important zodiac sign of Aries, the Godhead, as well as also Taurus and the symbol for the earth on elements, the cross. So this monad is a combination, a nice fitting combination, like a puzzle piece fitting in perfectly with all these symbols into one. Now, if you want to read this work in its entirety, okay, I have left a link in the description box below, and I highly recommend that you do read this, as it's very interesting information. Okay, let me read to you a little bit from Dee's work to show you the genius behind this hieroglyphic monad. Okay, let me begin. These are not my words, these are John Dee's words, starting from now. The following figure of the zodiacal sign Aries, in use amongst the astronomers, is the same for all the world, a sort of erection, both cutting and pointed, and it is understood that it indicates the origin of the fiery triplicity in that part of the sky. Therefore, we have added the astronomical sign Aries to signify that in the practice of this monad, the use of fire is required. We finished the brief hieroglyphic consideration of our monad, which we would sum up in one only hieroglyphic context. The sun and the moon of this monad desire the elements in which the 10th proportion will flower shall be separated, and this is done by the application of fire. So very wise words there for you to ponder on. Now, the mystical sign of the ram, composed of 2 semicircles connected by one common point, is very justly attributed to the place of the equinoctial Nymphomeron, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It basically means a day, a 12-hour day, proportional day, okay? Because the period of 24 hours divided by means of the equinox denotes most secret proportions. That I have said in respect of the earth. Now, the very ancient wise men and magi have transmitted to us 5 hieroglyphical signs of the planets, all of which are composed out of the signs used for the moon and the sun, together with the sign of the elements, the cross, and the hieroglyphical sign of Aries, the ram, which will become apparent to those who examine these figures. So if you look here, if you look Saturn, you can see it's a cross. So that's the symbol for the elements, and it has half the semicircle for the sign of Aries, one half. So it's combined of half Aries plus the symbol for Earth or the elements. And then if you look at Jupiter, basically the exact same, just instead of the semicircle being at the bottom of the cross, the semicircle's at the left hand side of the cross. Okay, the same with Mars. You can see as the sun is the symbol for the sun, is the symbol for Aries, and is half the symbol for the elements. Okay, same Venus, the sun and the elements. Mercury, the sun, moon and the elements. Okay, so that's what he's trying to show you here. Now each one of these signs will not be difficult to explain according to the hieroglyphical manner in view of our fundamental principles already posted. To begin with, we will speak in paraphrases of those which possess the characteristics of the moon, following that of those which possess a solar character. When our lunar nature, by the science of the elements, had accomplished the first revolution round our earth, then it was called mystically Saturn. Afterwards, at the following revolution, it was named Jupiter, and holds a very secret figure. Then the moon, developed by yet a third journey, was represented very obscurely again by this figure which it was their custom to call Mercury. You see how this is lunar, that it must be conducted through a fourth revolution will not be contrary to our most secret design, whatever certain sages may say. In this manner the pure magical spirit, by its spiritual virtue, will perform the work of the albification at the place of the moon. To us alone, and as it were in the middle of a natural day, he will speak hieroglyphically without words, introducing and imprinting these four Gegonic figures in the pure earth, very simply prepared by us, the last figure being in the middle of all others. So what Dee uses his symbol for is basically for astrological magic, and you can basically call on the power of the moon during the day instead of it being there at night. You can basically do a whole load of astrological magic through this monad and putting it together, all these different symbols like a puzzle piece, okay, together. Okay, Dee goes on to say, now regard the mystical character of Mars. Is it not formed from the hieroglyphs of the sun and Aries, and the magistry of the elements partly intervening? Remember, I showed you Mars is basically the sun. It has the symbol of Aries and half the elemental cross, okay, joining up Aries and the sun. So the elements partly intervening, this is what he's talking about. And that of Venus, I wish to know, is it not produced from that of the sun and the elements according to the best exponents? Therefore the planets look towards the solar periphery and work of revivification. In the progression we will notice this other Mercury will appear. Interesting, if you look at the symbol before, that's just the cross and the moon. Apparently that was the old symbol for Mercury, and there's another, obviously, the one we're familiar with the circle and the horns and the cross. But like you see above here, it just used to have the moon and the cross, apparently. So the first time I've ever came across it was in Dee's work, but he was a very learned man, so I'm assuming he knew what he was talking about in this respect, okay? So in the progression, we will notice this other Mercury will appear, who is truly the twin brother of the first. For by the complete lunar and solar magic of the elements, the hieroglyph of this messenger speaks to us very distinctly, and we should examine it carefully and listen to what it says. And by the will of God, It is the Mercury of the philosophers, the greatly celebrated microcosm, an atom. Therefore, some of the most expert were inclined to place him in a position of, and give him a rank equal to the Sun himself. Talking about Mercury. And now if you look on screen, you will see this is how you bring all these symbols together, okay, into the middle figure, which is his hieroglyphic monad. So you can see figure 1, okay, and figure 2 is Jupiter and Saturn. So you bring them together, putting them over each other, then it creates the sign of Aries plus the sign of the cross. You then double up with, you then add the moon, okay, on top of the cross, and so you end up with this symbol here, which is in number 4, okay, basically, and with Aries at the bottom of it. So symbol number 4 you put over again, okay, and then moving on to number 5 and number 6, you can see that there's 2 Venus symbols. So you'd introduce them over and over, and basically you have then created what looks like this right here, which is below the 7, below the Sun. And the final move, number 7, is placing the Sun in the middle of everything. Your 7th move, placing the Sun, and that completes this hieroglyphic monad, okay. But the interesting fact is, if you look at the symbol for the Sun minus the dot in the middle is 1-0. It's an O, okay. But with the dot in the centre, you've basically created 2 O's. You've created an outer O and an inner O. So you can clearly see the final move to create this hieroglyphic monad. The 7th move involves double O's. So, like you can see here, 007. It's pretty interesting to me. I think it truly has significance, okay, to do with 007, this hieroglyphic monad. The final move to complete the hieroglyphic monad, to me, clearly states 00, which is the 7th move. The symbol for the Sun, again, is a 00. You have an outer O and you have an inner O, thanks to the dot in the middle. Without the dot, it's just 1-0. Okay, but that's just my opinion. Tell me what you think about this in the comment section. Okay folks, a huge thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell at the right hand side of the subscribe button. Until next time, take care.